It is high time that ESPN featured a voice on air to defend Caitlin Clark rather than just using her as a punching bag, someone who offers actual basketball expertise to counter the relentless, senseless trashing she endures. It is completely absurd. I truly believe it stems from a toxic mix of
and then people thinking they're doing some form of activism by going against Caitlin Clark because of all the other nonsense that has surrounded her that has nothing to do with her herself.
For instance, yesterday on ESPN Radio, there was a specific segment I countered. I will play the clip first and then share my rebuttal instead of simply repeating myself. Last night, the Dallas Wings.
They were playing the New York Liberty. They were able to get a victory. But the reason why I want to highlight the Dallas Wings, you look at a season ago, they had the worst record, Freddie, in the WNBA. They had the #1 overall pick. They drafted AZ Fudd. But the way Paige Beckers is playing, her, Agumawale, AZ Fudd, and the rest of the Dallas Wings players, they have been connecting on all cylinders. They had the 4th best record right now in the WNBA.
It is quite remarkable that a team which was the cellar dweller last season can add one piece and suddenly see their entire culture and team spirit transformed for 2026, landing them in the 4th spot. But Paige...
I'm sorry to say it, folks, but everything we expected Caitlin Clark to be, Paige Beckers has been in the WNBA.
So why was Caitlin Clark even mentioned? What was the necessity of dragging her into this? By the way, the Dallas Wings were actually the worst team in the league last year while having Buchers? Really? They also added Jessica Shepard, who performed brilliantly, but that is secondary. Paige is fantastic, truly amazing.
She's great, but this is what I said about that yesterday, and it sums up my feelings. Praise another WNBA player without shading Caitlin Clark challenge. I'm going to say something really controversial. Both Caitlin Clark...
Caitlin and Paige are incredible athletes who have lived up to the massive expectations placed upon them. Yet, it seems, whenever someone is being showered with praise, commentators feel obligated to suggest they are fulfilling what Clark was supposed to be. I understand the narrative pressure better than most, but exactly how much better?
She was first team all WNBA as a rookie. She was just the player of the month last month. She's produced when it comes to points and assists better than any guard in history. At the same time, Paige has been great and amazing. If you want to argue who's the better between the two, that's fine. That's sports. That's fair game. But we can do it without shade.
Right after finishing that recording, I spotted a clip going viral from First Take. David Dennis was sharing his thoughts on Caitlin Clark. Everyone is pushing back against Candace Parker regarding the All-Star situation, primarily because Parker suggested the athletes were acting out of insecurity. Then there's the technical side of the voting process.
Yes, they didn't sit there and rank her number 11, but as far as the top 4 votes, she was 11th in vote tally for guards. And he said this on TV, and the first words that come out of his mouth...
I want to make sure we're perfectly clear about the specific nuances behind these votes. That part is crucial, implying that voters considered her the 11th best guard in the WNBA.
And as you mentioned, a lot of people didn't get ballots, a lot of people didn't vote, but what they did, they voted for.
I don't believe you can reasonably build a case that Caitlin Clark belongs in that top 4 guard category for the WNBA. Yes, saying you can't make a compelling argument for her being a top 4 guard in the WNBA is key.
Everything you say after that is finished. Because if you want to make the argument she's not a top 4 guard in the WNBA, I think that's ridiculous. But I'll hear you out.
Argument for her being a top 4 guard makes your following commentary ring hollow. Nobody can make that case right now. That is precisely why she placed 11th. She earned the 11th most votes for those 4 spots. So there really isn't a controversy there, particularly when you factor in that she is undeniably one of the most prominent stars in the WNBA. Actually, she's the most popular. That's undeniable. The
All-Star team. That is not the argument here. I think what bothers me is when this is framed as some sort of like petty jealousy or insecurity by these women in the WNBA, because that's not what I'm seeing was happening with Caitlin Clark.
Expressed her perspective. Sophie Cunningham mentioned that Clark has been a target. We all have our own views. We certainly observe and acknowledge the absurd hostility directed toward Caitlin Clark, or the way her colleagues are, constantly being dragged down. We shouldn't pretend these issues are imaginary, even while acknowledging some players are.
At the same time, there are some players who may value certain things more than others. There are, defense, for instance, even though, I don't know how you make this Paige argument and Caitlin falls so short of.
That an inherent competitive drive is at play here, which cannot simply be disregarded. She attracts immense attention, constant media coverage, and rivals eager to shut her down. That kind of intensity is all in good spirits. But just because, of all the public outcry, there is no reason to impulsively swing to the complete opposite extreme. Surely we
can discuss this stuff without it being black or white or right or left. It is possible, people. It is indeed possible.
However, I was pleased to witness someone else on television challenge that perspective. Stacy Dales, a former WNBA player and one-time league all-star, stood her ground. I appreciate that David Dennis was present there because it ensures
you get the other side of it. With Chinny Ogwumike coming out and defending Alyssa Thomas the way she did, and not defending Alyssa Thomas as a person, but defending that play as if it was nothing.
For Sydney Colson, who even played alongside Caitlin Clark in the past. Every single day, we see other athletes, including those comparable to the player Caitlin Clark was meant to be, weigh in. It was refreshing to
see somebody bluntly and unapologetically go the other direction and keep it real.
Yeah, it's quite a topic, isn't it, these days, Jess? Hello, David. I will just say this. We have to be very careful about how we look at
mechanics of player ballots for all-star selections. Players account for a quarter of the total, media another quarter, and fans the remaining half. With 180 athletes on rosters, only 85 actually cast votes, meaning the sample size is relatively limited. Consequently, you have individuals.
So you have players, for instance, guys that are voting for my teammate, my buddy. I can vote for my entire roster, the team I play on. But I do think you certainly have a pool of players who take this thing seriously. And while some may not take it seriously,
ignoring the underlying nuances of the debate, that remains a fair approach, which is vital, regardless of who the subject is. The small sample size is evident. Seeing Caitlin Clark ranked 11th is truly insulting.
It's preposterous to consider she would be even deemed worthy of or unworthy of being in a conversation of the 11th best guard in the WNBA.
So that was direct shot to David, whether she realized it or not.
Though I suspect she was fully aware. To further the discussion, the notion that some people genuinely think she doesn't merit being in the top 4 or starting among these all-stars is, to me, quite baffling.
Foolishness, because you have to look at the basketball. You have to break down the tape. And it tells me, are you watching the entire game? There's a lot of great players in this league.
I could discuss them indefinitely. Caitlin Clark is phenomenal, truly special, and world-class. She is a nightmare to guard because she maneuvers at brilliant angles, whether or not the ball is in her hands, and she remains.
And she is very unpredictable, I would tell you, defensively. Her ability to consistently hit anywhere from a 25 to a 30-foot jump shot from behind the arc, which is roughly 22 and change, is consistent. And even when she's out there and she's getting all this defensive attention, in her face attention, she still has to use that gather step to create space.
And still sink the bucket. The real difficulty for opposing teams, in my view, is that she is nearly impossible to blitz or double cover. Since she is just as elite at distributing as she is at shooting, she becomes a lethal
to defend, and that's why you see a lot of the contact. That's why, frankly, I mean, egos come into play. You ain't getting got by Caitlin Clark when you step in between those lines.
about the intensity of the competition. It makes the referees' jobs incredibly tough, so there are many dynamics at play. She is an exceptionally gifted athlete. Thank you. Goodness me, thank you. I have dedicated my life to the sport of basketball, having spent my whole career covering it. It is perfectly fine to acknowledge her greatness. Too often, with Caitlin Clark, I feel like I'm in that scene from Zoolander, like I'm losing my mind. It is refreshing to finally witness some level-headedness on the network.